Hello, 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 it is Enforma, and today I'm going to be going back with another tutorial. People were asking me for one, so you know what, why not? I'm going to be doing something that I've been doing a lot recently, which is material making, because what better topic to do than something that you are feeling confident with? And I'm just going to say this right now, this is not something that you need to know, but I highly recommend knowing this knowledge, and pretty much today we're going to be going over the following, which are essential tools for material making, like paint.net, VTF edit, Orta, stuff like that. How to create override materials, which is just like editing stuff, and how to identify which ones, which is just a little tip, not something you really need to know. Base texture and bump maps, which are pretty much like the textures and like the bumpiness of a model. Phongboost and Phongexponent, which are pretty much just like shininess, giving it some kind of like texture. Alpha, which is like transparency, and how to turn that into a slider of sorts. Color and phongtint codes. The color will get a lot more important later on with the texture that I'm going to be working with, so bear with me there. Basetexturetransform, which I'm only going to go over the basics because I don't know all too much about it, honestly. We're going to go over some important codes like self-illumination, which just adds illumination, adding ambient occlusion to textures that don't have them, like the eye right here. Rimlights, which makes dark models easier to see without lighting and does not affect the final product. And I'll explain most of those later. How to use Orta, which allows you to save override materials easily if you don't want to write them into VMT files. And lastly, I'm going to try to teach you how to create gobo lights and, to an extent, animated textures, because I have created an animated gobo light once before, and I'm like, you know what? I feel like this could be useful knowledge to know. And this is probably going to take a lot for a video. This might be my longest tutorial yet, but I'm going to include time codes for each individual segment, so if there's just one thing that you need to know, sorry about that, I will have it in the description. So, you know what? Let's get started on this Freddy model here, which I have a different Freddy model just so, well, it's a little bit different. We're going to try to retexture most of, if not the entire model. So, yeah, here we go. Segment 1, we have the 4 essential downloads that we are going to be using for this, which I'm going to have all the links for these in the description. We are going to need VTF edit, which is pretty much what allows you to change VTF file, or VMT files, sorry. Like, just view all that stuff, and it's just useful to have. Orta, which allows you to save override materials much easier than to mess with the VMT files every time you want to change materials. Plus, it just allows you to, like, have presets, for example. Paint.net, which is mostly useful for the next thing, but this is just a handy program to have. I recommend getting some plugins for it, but this is a plugin that we're going to be needing, which is the paint.net VTF plugin, which allows you to save as a VTF file, which cuts out a lot of the process, because whenever you're saving it, you can set a lot of the flags, all that important stuff, and it just makes things a lot easier. So, let's actually get to some of the meat and potatoes of this, which is going to be starting in SFM. Alright, segment 2. We are going to be adding override materials and identifying one of the textures. So, pretty much what we're going to have to start with, right-click on the model, Freddy 1, which is the model that I have here, and then go hover over to Add Override Materials and left-click. Then what you will want to do is right-click, go to Show an Element Viewer, Model, and then if you have Element Viewer over here, which this is not by default, but I'd suggest having Element View over here. Normally you should, I believe, click here to have like Element Viewer show up. Anyway, you'll see materials right here. You're going to want to click this, and you might be bombarded with information, and this is pretty much all of the textures. Now, a lot of this might just seem overwhelming, but let's find one. Let's look at Suit 1. This is a way that I use to identify textures. Usually I will like either set the Phongs extremely high, or I will just set the texture to black, but let's right-click, Add Attribute. We're going to add String, and then $base texture. And you can see, normally this is not the texture, but you can see from like the texture being a lot different that this is suit 1. This is the texture that we have selected. Anyway, let's get on to the next segment. Alright, segment 3, base texture and bump maps. This is something that I suggest if you're going to be messing with the base textures and bump maps, and pretty much I would create a directory specifically for like the bump maps and stuff that you plan on using. So I would go into user mod, materials, models. This is where the line of code is going to start, which I will get into in a moment. And then create a folder. Mine here is common. And then here I just have all of my materials, which, well, you are not going to have these materials, so don't bother typing in the codes that I'm going to put in. But anyway, this is where you should store your VTF in, or your VTF files, not VMTs, sorry. But this is pretty much, you will have textures and bump maps in here. Like, I have a folder for both of them. I need to organize these later on, but I digress. We're going to be adding a texture and a bump map to this. So we're going to right-click, add attribute, hover over that, go to string. This will be for both base texture and bump map, but this does not apply to all of them, as you'll see soon. $base texture. And then you're going to see the same thing happened as before. Now, as I said, the beginning of the string starts with models, and then we're going to go to common, and then since we set a base texture, I'm going to go to the textures folder, and then I have one called suit 1, which is going to make the suit gray. Now, this will go into a code that I go into later, but don't worry, he's not going to be your Five Nights at Freddy's OC for too long. Now, we're going to add a bump map, which is pretty much like this bumpy, like the black spots here. That is the bump map. But we're going to see more drastic difference once I go to string. Same process as before, of course. $bump map. And then you see there's another change. Models, common, bumps, and then let's set it to bump, let's, it doesn't matter, bump 1, and you can see the bump map changes with the different bumps that I have in my folder. And if you want to find bump maps, there are probably places that you can find to download them. You can find images online to use as bump maps, and that is pretty much one thing that you could do for bump maps. I don't know any good resources to find VTF bump maps and whatnot for SFM, unless you wanted to dig through like models that you have and whatnot, get the VTF files and throw them into a folder. But anyway, let's get on to the next set of codes. And for the next segment, I already did the like material work for this. As you can see, it's all the same codes as before, so don't think I'm like 20 steps ahead. I just did this so I don't have to do it later or on camera. But we're going to be doing phongs, and phongs are pretty funny. You can only see phongs with lights disabled, or enabled, my bad. So you're going to want to enable lighting, and right-click, spawn a light, and, well, you're already going to see something we're going to go into later, which is like this orange bit, which this actually helps with the later segment. And we're going to set a light, something like this. Something not too bright. And let's go to suit 1 again. We're going to go to float, going to right-click, Phongboost. And you can see a lot of the arms and whatnot just went silent. There's no more shininess on that. Now let's set that to 1. And you can see the higher the value, the more bright that it is. But you don't just use Phongboost by itself. No, you want to also use Phongexponent in the same tag. Float Phongexponent. And now you can see it's a lot different. We're going to set this lower, and it looks just a lot wetter. You don't want to keep this at 0 unless like the material is good for it. You can have like it at 1 to give it a more like soft kind of approach. It doesn't look like it's on there, like it's wet. It looks more like a fur thing. You can also set these as decimal values to make it less impactful. Like there, like that's not all too much. And that is Phongboost and Phongexponent. So you know what? Let's go on to the next segment. Now that I have the phongs set up, I am going to move on to segment 5, which is going to be color and phongtint, because I think this is important to go on after phong. So pretty much, phongtint and color, they're both very simple commands. I'm going to demonstrate color first on, well, suit 1, that is going to be the one that I show on camera. You're going to right-click, add attribute, color. Color is not too useful unless you have materials like this. And then you're going to $color in the color tag. It's going to go to a black, but here you get like a whole color thing. You can mess with the colors accordingly, and it'll pretty much treat itself as an overlay to the color that you were previously using. And see, there we go, we have the color here. Gonna make it a little brighter. You can mess with these sliders. One thing that I recommend if you're going to be playing with color, make sure that the texture that you're messing with is not at the bottom of the screen. So if it is, and it's one of the bottom textures, and you can't scroll down, like for example, if I was messing with ear purple, I would left-click, hold, and you can drag it up to the top to pretty much just put it at the top and make it a lot easier to work with. Next up, phongtint, which is going to be a big thing with this at least, and maybe I'll readjust the phongs accordingly afterwards, who knows. You're going to right-click, add attribute, color, and then phongtint. And you can see, actually that didn't do as much as I thought it would. Some models are kind of odd. Phongs on models act very different than on other models, so pretty much phongtint, it changes the color of the phong. Like, by default, it's going to be white. Here it's an orange color for some reason. I don't know why that's the case on this model, but it is just how it is. Sometimes it's like that with models that already have like a form of phongtint, so I'm just going to enforce the orange and make it something like that. And now we're going to go on to the next segment. Quick tip, important thing to note, you can right-click the color, like for example the color here, and if you want to use it again, right-click, paste, and bam, there you go, you have the same color that you were using before. I just felt like throwing that in there because it's good to know. Next up is one that I don't recommend using too much, but it is something that I recommend having nonetheless. I did change Freddy's materials again just because don't use this as an example. This is just to teach you guys. This doesn't look good. But anyway, I'm going to be teaching you alpha, which is pretty much translucency. And we're going to, of course, apply this to suit 1. Right-click, add attribute, float, and then $alpha. And you can see the suit is gone. A big thing with alpha that should be noted is that it does mess with shadows weirdly. Like, you can still see the suit there. So be very careful if you're going to use alpha. And another thing that I'm going to demonstrate with alpha, you can right-click, suit 1, create animation set for element. I don't use this all too much. And you can see, actually, we have alpha, Phongexponent, and Phongboost, so let's actually mess around with those. And we're gonna see alpha, which I'm going to set up, and here you can see an animatable slider. Another weird janky thing with alpha, which I think only applies because of, yeah, that only applies because of ambient occlusion. But anyway, alpha. Then you got Phongboost, which you can actually animate Phongboost, which is fun. And then Phongexponent. So yeah, those are really nice things to know. It is really, really good to know how to get that stuff. The animation side of it, it's just nice to have. Like, you can have a character disappearing, all that stuff. And you can mess with the values, but I would not set alpha's value above 1. I don't know what will happen, and I'm pretty sure it would crash your SFM. If you're feeling experimental, say what happens in the comments. I'm not going to test it here. Next up, we have the basics of Basetexturetransform, which, again, I'm not too familiar with it, but this is something that I recommend. Like, if you're using a bump map, let's actually change suit 1 briefly, just to give it a better demonstration. Like here, this bump map looks nice, but it just is a little too big. Something that you could use is right-click suit 1, or whichever texture you're doing, add attribute, and then go to matrix, $Basetexturetransform. transform. It doesn't do much, but it does give you the 4x4 matrix. And you're going to see this. It's going to be like, whoa, what is this? Well, don't be afraid. All I know are 2 values, and I would just recommend messing with these 2. But there are some other tutorials for other things, but with textures like these, on at least FNAF models, it's not too important. So let's set this to 2, and bam, it just makes the texture a bit smaller because it's like making, well, the texture smaller. But you can see some little things like that, so I would be careful using this because sometimes it can look really bad. Or if you just are feeling daring and you want the biggest bump ever, you could set it at a value below 1, and then bam, there you go. We're gonna get rid of that. We don't need that. Also, if you see this, like, don't mess with any of this. That will crash your SFM. Mark this down and then reopen it, and pretty much it comes back normally. I know that happened with the values if you did that. What happens if you delete it? Okay. Yeah, let's act like none of that happened. Undo that. Anyway, let's go on to the next thing. Do not delete that. That'll brick everything. So, be careful if you're going to animate the sliders. Alright, now for the next segment, which are some important VMT codes. These are not codes that I know how to implement within the override materials, so I usually just mess with them within the VMTs. Which, Freddy here, he's looking a little dark. We're going to fix that. This is a very useful code that I don't see enough people talking about. We're going to go to the model directory. I'm going to go here. No? Okay, yeah, I guess these model directories are a little weird. And we're just going to do this on suit1, of course. Suit1.vmt. This is pretty much where everything goes on. And you can see some of the codes here that were present before. And you can change them in here if you want to, which I don't a lot of the time. That's what I use Orida for. But, again, that is just what I... shoot, hold on, let me open up my other document here. VMT codes. Alright, first up, we're going to show off rimlights, which... Rimlights, usually you hear the term like rimlights, oh yeah, in SFM. But anyway... This is something very interesting. So let's create a thing here and create another line of code. And we're going to see rimlightexponent, and rimlightboost. And I'm going to include this all in the description. All these codes are going to be in the description. It's going to be a long description. I'm really sorry. But anyway, we saved that and nothing happened. We're going to want to call on mat_reload all materials and hit enter. This will take a moment, so just bear with SFM, and then you're going to see something happen in here, which error, you're going to get a lot of errors, it doesn't matter. And, wait, did it apply? Alright, apologies to the sudden cut, but for some reason the rim lighting did not work on this model. The directories are bad, and Rob should be ashamed of that. But anyway, this is what it will do. You see this white bit that kind of highlights the bump map and everything? This is what the Rimlight codes are going to do. This makes dark materials a lot easier to see within SFM. So I highly recommend it, especially on endoskeletons, even if I didn't apply it on this one. It pretty much works like the envmaps here, the ones that glow in the dark, which are nice to get rid of. So I'll actually tell how to get rid of that soon. But yeah, that's definitely something nice to know. If you want to animate a model that the textures are way too dark, just add the Rimlight codes, again, in the description. Again, temporarily changing model just because the Springtrap model is giving me problems with one thing, but it doesn't matter. This is actually a model that I needed to change this with because you can see the orange parts. There's no AO. It looks honestly kind of bad. And you can see in here, if you look, ambient occlusion 0.04. We're going to set that to parentheses 1. Make sure that you keep that there are parentheses around all this stuff, or else things will break. I don't know how to really explain all that properly, but with the ambient occlusion set up higher, bam, there we go. AO. Proper AO, and other things on this model. I should have also probably changed this, but whatever. Those are the codes that I was wanting to talk about within the VMT files. if there's anything else I probably forgot. Oh yeah, envmaps. This is the last thing that I'm going to be talking about. I'm not going to show all the envmap stuff just because, like, it's very difficult to use properly, but I'm going to show one thing involving them on this Freddy model. As you can see, there are, like, these glowing textures, and it doesn't look all that great, in my personal opinion. And, like, it's very, very situational when you actually want to use this, so we're going to go to the hat and bow tie texture, which is the culprit here. Add attribute, color, and then $envmaptint. Bam, it's gone. I didn't get rid of all of them just because I don't really want to, but nonetheless, that should be helpful for getting rid of those pesky glowing textures. Anyway, finally on to the next segment. Last, but most certainly not least, how to properly use Orta. We're going to pretty much be just using these Freddy textures because, I mean, we got all the overrides and whatnot. We're going to right-click. You're going to go to Rig. If you have anything locked, this is not going to work. So you're going to want to, like, unlock transforms before you do any of this. And if anything breaks, just relock it afterwards. Because this is in the Rig section. We're going to Rig, Orta, and we're going to Save Override Materials. We're going to set this as tutorial and save, and there we go. We have the Orta texture saved. Now let's spawn in a new Freddy model. We're going to remove override materials, and we're going to see, we're going to see the original Freddy textures, which these are the original, these are the edited ones. But pretty much, if we want to, let's say this is a new session now, and we're going to be using this Freddy model. To open up the override materials, the same as these ones, we're going to add override materials, Rig, Orta, load override materials, and it's going to save as a JSON file, tutorial, or whichever file that you have it as. I'd recommend having directories for all your models because just be organized. And open, and then bam, there you go. You got all the textures and whatnot that you had previously made on the model, and that just saves a lot of time. And I mean, pretty much Orta is just it's pretty much a way to not have to dig all the way into the VMT files, because the only thing changed in the VMT file is something that didn't quite work. So, Orta's just a nice way to go. It's nice and good. Alright, next up we are going to be going over textures and gobos. Gobos being gobo lights. Here's a texture that I have created. I'm kind of proud of it. But anyway, this texture doesn't matter all too much. First we're going to be going over the gobo lights. And a big thing with gobos is, or just textures in SFM in general, you want to make the file the resolution of 1024 or a variable of it like 2048, stuff like that. And pretty much you want it to be a square. And this is pretty much just a general tutorial for the VTF side of this stuff. So we're going to be creating a very scummy gobo light. And it's just going to, let's draw something scummy real quick. Have a little smiley face. And pretty much, here's my gobo. It is the best gobo you've ever seen. Actually, let's give it some glow. A big thing about creating a gobo for like SFM and whatnot, you want to make sure it's a square and that the background is black and the texture is white, unless like there's something that you're trying to do with that. But I'm not going to go into that here. You can experiment with it all you want. And then we're going to save as. And then we are going to click on this, VTF. Let's save this as gibo.vtf. And pretty much you can see all of the stuff regarding gibo. We're going to set the flags. I usually set the clamps because I think that keeps it from repeating. I've forgotten how to create textures. I haven't really done one in a long time. But anyway, we're going to set those two clamps, I think it's clamp S and clamp T, and then clamp all. And then we're going to go OK. And now, let's go here. Let's create another light. Right-click, set light gobo texture. And let's type in gibo, because I have it in one of my folders. And then models common gibo. A big thing about creating gobo lights is you want to have those flags so it doesn't repeat. I'm pretty sure I set it in a way so it doesn't repeat. Yeah, here we go. Here is gibo. And now we have our gobo light. You can set like all sorts of different things. You can draw something onto it. And pretty much there is our gibo. And, well, of course, you can have it as different colors. The main reason I was saying to make it black, because, like, the black is the surrounding part. The white is pretty much whatever color you want it to be. And if you had, like, a color, like, for example, you had, like, a blue, and let's say you made the white light red, the part that you would have blue would then be purple. So you can have it as kind of like a multicolored light of sorts, if you want to use it as that. But, yeah, there you go. That's how you create, like, a basic gobo light, and you can ruin it by adding radius to it. There we go. There is gibo with radius on it. Alright, next up I'm going to show you how to do the animated texture trash. We're going to be using this as a reference just because what else do I use? We're going to save this to a folder that I made just for him. And we're going to go to... I'm choosing Easy GIF because I don't know a good way to really split GIFs into image sequences. And we're going to grab this, and put this in here, upload it. Again, it's got to be a certain size, but again, if you have a better way to do this, then I'd recommend that instead. Split that into frames, output images as PNG, and download frames as a zip. Now we're going to download that, go into my folder. Oh, my WinRAR license has run out officially. We're going to put all of this into my new folder. And we got all the spinning duck that we'll ever need. And I forgot the way that you have to do this exactly. No, I don't think you click and drag. Do you import? Import, yes. And then let's go to just the video folder. Him. And then we're going to take all the frames. I don't know if you could just import the GIF, but I would do that. Where is the thing? Animated texture. Resize to the nearest power of 2. Triangle. Sure. Maximum width. Alright, yeah, I think that's good. And now it's gonna take a moment because stuff is slow. The spinning duck has been complete. And you can see there are all sorts of different frames for this. You got all this. Just go through the frames. I don't know if there's a way to really play with the frame rate. I believe that there is, but I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, clamp S, clamp T, and then clamp all again. As an info? No. But anyway, yeah, we're gonna be saving that as... We're going to save that as funnyhaha.vmt. Now we're going to go back into SFM. I'm going to change around our gibo again. Funnyhaha. I'm going to rescan because this is a new texture. And then after this, we should have our funny duck. There he is. Again, here's a good example as to why you don't want to... Yep, okay. I'll need to expand the shot here, but as you can see, our duck is spinning. I would recommend doing this with, like, either a text thing if you want to add lyrics to your video, or, like... I don't know a good way to put it. But yeah, anyway, we got our spinning duck, the most important gobo light of all. I will probably drop this in my server because I think people need spinning duck in their life. Hell yeah. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for this video. I hope this helped you. I know it wasn't the most information. It might seem either like a lot or not that much, but just know that these are like a mixture of these is pretty much what I do for my material making, and people think that my materials are pretty good. And if you play around with this stuff, you could probably get some good results as well. Bump maps and whatnot, I'd recommend looking online. It's not too hard to encounter them, as long as you get those squares, like, good resolution, not like rectangle bump maps, whatever those are for. But all this stuff, I feel like this could be helpful knowledge for some of you guys, and if it was helpful, I would hope that you would leave a like and maybe tell someone that you think could be benefited from this information. This is Enforma, and I really hope to see you guys soon.